sleep will enhance every single training day, thus eventually enhancing your performance in the long run. And I'm so into sleep. I've sat in those seats before, and if you need to doze off right now, go ahead. I see some people have already taken this recommendation before I talked about it, which is totally great. If you need to take a little power nap, that's totally fine. I encourage you to sleep, okay? We can get this information to you in some other format or some other form, or your coach can help you out with this information too later on. So if you need to doze off a little bit, I'm totally okay with it. I will not be offended in the slightest. Thanks for the introduction, Coach. And I just want to say I'm honored to be here. You know, there was a time when I was sitting in the very seats that you're in now, listening and hoping to glean information from speakers up here on the stage. And we got a bunch of people from a bunch of different areas, right? So we got a couple teams from Utah, right? Where are you guys at? All right. Now, me, I have a bias towards people in Texas, so where are the Texas teams at? Oh, man. That's great. Some Eagle Pass and some other areas. Gosh, I'm super excited to see a UIL shirt front row. That's what I'm talking about. And yes, I grew up, I kind of cut my teeth in running under the Coach Greens, so Coach Green Sr. and then Coach Green Jr. or Juris Green. Went to the NXN and got to do a couple of really fun things there. And then I got these wonderful experiences running at Adams State. And one thing that I always look back, there were some kind of negative times when I was running at Adams State because I kind of became an expert while here at getting injured. So I learned firsthand how to get injured. And that really drove me in chiropractic school to practice sports medicine and help fix a lot of injuries and guide people with injuries, especially runners and endurance athletes, and now I work with a bunch of skiers and people like that. And I got into the treatment of injuries, and now I'd really like to go full circle and become an expert in helping prevent injuries and hopefully prevent a lot of the fallbacks and problems that I experienced while I was a runner in high school and a runner here. So hopefully today I can give you all a lot of the information that you need to excel and live up to your full potential as runners, as athletes overall, and also as people. So even in the scholastic space, all of this information will be useful across a wide variety of arenas in your life. And we're going to begin with a little bit of a story and a little bit of a case study. So does anybody recognize this individual, Mary Kane? Pretty decent runner for high school, right? So you guys are all in high school. And you may recognize some of this name from the record boards because in 2013 and 2014, this young girl, Mary Kane, sorry about the blurry picture, came through and she took the running world by storm. She held basically every single high school American record from the 800 meters all the way up to the 3,200 and the 2 mile. And once she got out of school, she got a basically 6 or 7 figure contract to run for the winningest coach at the time in track and field. Now, during the 2014 year, she graduated high school. She also won the World Outdoor Junior Championships in the 3,000 meters. Then she went on to win indoor, not high school, not juniors, but win indoor 1,500 meter run at USA's. Then in that same outdoor season, she placed second in the 1,500. And she had a lot of very impressive PRs, but then she went on to run for this coach named Alberto Salazar. Has anybody ever heard of that name? Yeah, not quite the positive connotation that it once rang in our circles, right? And she trained under Alberto Salazar, and her really big goal was to win Olympic golds for the United States and really represent her country at the international level. And she was set to do so in the year of 2014. But then something happened, and by 2016, she finished outside of the top 10. She finished 11th place in the 1,500 meters at the Olympic trials, and she had run much slower by a factor of about 10 seconds from her times when she was graduating high school. So the big question you should be asking yourselves is, what happened to this individual? What led to this decrease in performance as her training age increased? So theoretically, under the best circumstances, basically a blank check for training and running, and having really successful coaching staff training her, she should be getting better, right? However, what we saw was the exact opposite of that. And Mary Kane has put out a lot of really good information about what happened to her while under the coaching and tutelage of Alberto Salazar. Now, I want to give you a little bit of kind of medical information. We're going to talk in a second about body mass index. So this is a relationship between your height and weight, and it's really not a great factor for a couple of different reasons. However, what we have found in the literature, the research regarding runners and running injuries, is that people with a body mass index, their weight relative to their height, below 19 kilograms per meter squared is associated with a 3-time greater risk for a bone stress injury, which is just a fancy term for a stress fracture. Has anybody in here gotten a stress fracture? You don't necessarily have to raise your hands, but I was the wonderful recipient of a couple of stress fractures while I was a freshman at the Woodlands High School. So that's very common to happen. I was growing at a very high rate. My peak height velocity was kind of in full bone turnover as far as the lengthening of my bones. And I was very thin. So remember that number, 19, is kind of the cutoff. If you're below 19, then you have a 3-time greater risk for stress fractures, okay? Now, when Mary Kane joined the Organ Track Project, which is no longer a group that's in existence for obvious reasons that you may or may not have heard of, an odd constraint was put on her physiology. And there is this pervasive myth in endurance athletics that thinner and lighter is going to automatically translate to faster running. And they put this physiological constraint on Mary Kane's weight, and they said, you need to become thinner in order to become faster and operate at this very, very high level that you have now entered. So they put this constraint of 114 pounds on her. And that relative to her height, hindsight being 2020, we can look at these figures and say, well, obviously this is something that happened. That relative to her height would put her at a BMI of 17.9, so well below the threshold that researchers have now found to correlate significantly with stress fractures. So Mary Kane, while she was training with Alberto Salazar, had 5 separate stress fractures in separate locations. So these are some of the things that manifested in her musculoskeletal system as a result of these physiological constraints. So she obviously wasn't provided with optimal nutrition and support regarding her diet and her lifestyle. And this not only manifested in the result of 5 separate stress fractures, but these things took a significant toll on her emotional health, as well as her hormonal regulation. So she had significant hormonal disruptions during this time, and her emotional state took a significant turn for the worst, to the point where she was extremely depressed, anxious, and even was inflicting self-harm upon herself. And now she is basically in the midst of a $20 million lawsuit for emotional damage and basically loss of income because her running career was cut short. And that is largely because of these physiological constraints put on by Alberto Salazar and his coaching staff, which did not include, one, female coaches, so Mary Kane was a female, and they did not have any female coaches that understood female physiology, nor did they have any licensed clinical nutritionists to give any professional advice regarding nutrition and how athletes should fuel for racing and the significant amount of training that she was undergoing. So how do we fix that issue? Because this is a fairly pervasive issue that really went to the forefront with this one athlete. However, we can see the ramifications in the top level of this very common thread amongst endurance athletes like yourselves. So how do we combat this? Well, we need to have adequate caloric consumption. So we need to eat enough that is commensurate to the high level of training output that we are doing on a daily basis. So have you guys been running like pretty hard this week? Raise your hand if you've been like working out and like running this week. Okay, so hopefully everybody, right? Unless you have a stress fracture, in which case, please don't be running right now. You gotta like heal up from that, you know? So, adequate caloric consumption. And one thing that I did, I think really well when I was in your seats was I ate a lot of carbs. Anybody like pretty like carb happy, like I'm digging the carbs? And carbohydrates are very important and a very important factor in our caloric consumption. However, the thing that I completely neglected was something that is still a very important component of recovery and the regeneration of muscle tissue and bone tissue. So does anybody know what like bones are made of? What do we got? Calcium, right? What else? Is it just calcium? Yeah, big piece of chalk. What do we got? Exactly. Yeah, so we talked about bone marrow. And red bone marrow that you talked about, it's located within a lot of our long bones. And red bone marrow is very highly proportionate in adolescents like yourselves who are still growing. And our red bone marrow is really important because it helps us produce red blood cells. So that's what helps us carry oxygen throughout our body. However, one thing that we're missing is actually protein. Yeah. And that's something I didn't really know about until I went to, chiropractic school and did further research on the subject. And now I actually teach anatomy and physiology and do all this other nerdy stuff. But our bones are made of calcium, especially in the form of a crystal called a hydroxyapatite crystal, and it's made of a form of protein called collagen. And the proportion of collagen changes as we age. And that's why fractures can be different in really young individuals versus really old individuals. Now, you all, being adolescents, like I said, your bones are growing at a very quick rate, but they're at a relatively high proportion of collagen. So bones not only need calcium, that hydroxyapatite crystal, but you also need energy availability and the building blocks of connective tissue in the form of collagen. Now, protein is really just a basically umbrella term for specific amino acids, and we have a bunch of essential amino acids that we need to intake in order for normal physiology and normal growth to occur. So you are all going through normal growth right now with a high load of training, and that's why an emphasis on protein can be very important, not only for your bones, but also all of the other connective tissues that we need to regenerate after a bout of exercise, such as your muscles. And something that plagued me a lot when I was at Adams State was my tendon health. So you guys aren't exactly at the biggest risk stage for tendinopathies, but has anybody ever had like Achilles tendinopathy or anything like that? You don't have to raise your hand, but some of you probably know someone that has had a tendon injury. And I had many tendon injuries, and some of that can be attributed to my low amount of protein intake. And then the last thing that we need to do is get adequate amounts of sleep. Has anybody ever heard of 7 to 9 hours being the gold standard for sleep? Maybe, kind of, sort of. Now, for adolescents, like I said, people that are growing at a very fast rate, everyone in this room, except for me, you all need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So your sleep needs are actually higher than the general population and adult populations. So sleep is very crucial for your recovery and for injury prevention. And we'll dive into each of these topics as we go. So now, how much do we actually need to eat? So how much you eat is measured in calories. And for females, so for girls, you need about 2,500 to 28 calories per day. Okay, so this is what you overall need to intake. And that includes carbohydrates, fats, and proteins all mixed together to give you your overall caloric consumption. And this relates to a factor called energy availability. Now, when I was in college and when I was in chiropractic school, I was doing all this research. How could I have prevented all of the injuries that I did? Should I have gotten different shoes? Should I have been doing different prehab exercises? For some reason, this is like the prehab exercise that I did in the training room like every single day at Adams State, you know? You got your like 2-pound weights, and then you went like this, and then you're like, all right, that should decrease your chances of injury. But the things that really stick out in the literature as being crucial factors that are related to the onset of injuries and season-ending injuries is actually our energy availability. And our energy is measured in calories. And then we also have the other important component, which is the protein intake, facilitating the building blocks of our connective tissues so those can regenerate. Now, then when we look at protein consumption, for both boys and girls that are undergoing a lot of physical activity, just like you all are, the measure is kind of complicated looking, 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. So what does that even mean? We'll get into that in a second. And I want to provide you all with a range of nutritional consumption because nutrition isn't a specific target. One thing that people can erroneously think is, I can have perfect nutrition if I hit my perfect macros and my perfect intake every single day. And that perfect simply does not exist. So the best thing that we can do is consistently do the basics well and hit a broad range of targets. And this is going to make it a lot easier on yourselves as far as hitting a broad target versus thinking that I need to hit a very specific bullseye. One thing I missed was males or boys, typically we're growing a little bit faster, we're growing a little bit more muscle mass because of hormonal differences, so they need a little bit more caloric consumption. They need between 3,100 and 3,600 calories per day. But then you might be asking, how do I measure this? Well, I'm not affiliated with literally like anything right now, but Chronometer.com is a nice, very free resource that can give you a macronutrient as well as micronutrient breakdown for your food intake. And it's really simple. You actually just type in the food, and then it just pops up with all of these different markers and different information about the food that you just ate. So you just put in the food and then the amount that you ate, and it will automatically give you what you got out of that food. I would talk about micronutrients and things like that because there are many that are extremely important for you all, such as iron, calcium, vitamins, etc., like B12. So if you have a spare like 4 hours later on, then I can bring you guys in and we can talk a little bit more. But we're going to keep it nice and short and sweet for you all today. So Chronometer.com is a really helpful resource and a really easy to use resource for hitting those broad targets. Oh God, now we're going to have to do some math. So everybody pull out your phone right now. I know that's probably not what people say, Everybody's like, oh, don't worry, I got it out already, Yeah, you don't have to like hold it down here and like check it like this, You just pull it up. I'll give you guys, a couple seconds. You can check your TikToks and your Instagrams. I'm going to get a little sip of water, okay? So get done with that, Everybody good? A little dopamine influx, yeah? Yeah, got it good? All right. So now let's have you all pull up the calculator, okay? And I want you to input your approximate body weight in pounds, okay? And then I'd like for you to divide that number we're all like plus minus division and stuff, right? It's been a long time. I'm still able to do this stuff, but then the algebra and stuff, I might need some help from you guys. But take your body weight in pounds and divide that by 2.2, and that will give you your body weight in kilograms, okay? Now, once you've done that, you can write it down or save that number. Now I want you to take that body weight in kilograms or kilograms. I'm not really sure which one it is. Kilograms? Does anybody else have a preference on that? So body weight in kilograms, and I want you to multiply that number by 1.2. If you multiply your body weight in kilograms by 1.2, then you will get the low end of your protein intake that you need to get in every single day of the week. So anybody take any rest days where you don't run quite as much, or maybe you don't run at all? Well, that's great. That's really important for recovery. Now, does anybody ever think, oh, well, my energy needs also drop this day, so I should eat less, right? In terms of protein consumption, this is wrong. So your muscle protein synthesis, the synthesis of all those connective tissues such as muscles, tendons, ligaments, and even bone is still ongoing and may be ongoing even more so on your recovery days. So you're going to have recovery days and decreased energy expenditure on the track and on the roads. However, there are no rest days from protein consumption. We want to keep muscle protein synthesis high every single day, especially on recovery days. So at the very least, you need that body weight in kilograms times 1.2. And now I want you to take that body weight in kilograms and multiply it by 2. And this is the high end of your protein needs for every single day. So if you're at, 7,500 feet of elevation, and you're doing some really intense training with all your buddies at a really prestigious distance camp, like the Adams State Distance Camp, your protein needs will actually go up because they're going to go up commensurate to your energy expenditure and the rate at which you are breaking down connective tissue. So during weeks like this and weeks of really hard training, and even days where you have competitions, your protein consumption needs to go up commensurate to your energy expenditure. And that's when you want to be on the high end of 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight. Whoop. Okay, so the math is over, so you can all rest assured, okay? That's okay. We got through it together. You all did very well. At least I hope so. I wasn't checking your work, but I bet you all did a great job. Now let's talk about supplements, okay? I'm not affiliated with any supplement companies or any supplement brands, but what if I told you that there was indeed a supplement that can improve endurance performance and has been shown to improve endurance performance across a wide variety of domains, as far as in elite race walkers, cyclists, runners. They found that it increases three-point shooting average in basketball. It increases the accuracy of tennis serves, all these different things. It also has been shown time and time again in many studies to improve your mood and enhance your memory, which is really cool when you're in school because if you have better memory, then you can study less, which I was psyched on. So it'll improve your memory and it will promote optimal physiology. So it'll promote optimal hormonal balances, glucose regulation, and, of course, recovery. And what if I told you without this supplement, you would be at a 60% increased chance of a musculoskeletal injury, whether that be bone stress injury, whether that be tendinopathies, muscle strains, etc. And if you don't take the supplement, you'll have poor performance. You'll be an irritable person, and nobody will like to hang out with you. Well, less people will like to hang out with you. People will still hang out with you, like your parents, maybe your uncles and your cousins, family reunions, stuff like that. They'll still hang out with you, don't worry. And you'll also get worse grades. And this has been shown time and time again. So if you were able to take that supplement on a daily basis, would you? And the answer is obviously Yes, right? And some of you may have keyed in, this is actually not a supplement that's over the counter, but this is all related to sleep. And we talked about the specific range of sleep that we need to get as far as the quantity and continuity of sleep, 8 to 10 hours per night, or in total, we need 8 to 10 hours as adolescents. I'm not an adolescent anymore, but I still need like 7 to 9 hours. And overall, as athletes, we suck at sleep. We're not good at getting enough sleep. And we've done a couple studies on athletes, and we found that 50 to 75% of collegiate and high school athletes have somewhat disturbed sleep, so they're not able to get a continuous 8 to 10 hours per night. So look to the left and right of you. Guess what? All of you have bad sleep. So all of you probably have some form of disturbed sleep in some form or another. Now, about a quarter of individuals that are at high level of athletics have very highly disturbed and pathological sleep. And with highly disturbed and pathological sleep, we will definitely see many of the ramifications that I just talked about if you don't take this wonderful and free sleep supplement. And this brought the IOC, or the International Olympic Committee, to release a consensus statement regarding the specific needs for sleep and how sleep is essential for athletes, especially youth and adolescent athletes like yourselves. Then in 2019, the NCAA followed suit, and they issued their consensus statement as well as recommendations for how we can improve our sleep so that we can get normal physiology and then also optimize our performance. And I'm going to show you some of the ways in which you can improve sleep. Now, me, when I was in college, I neglected my sleep. I was bad at sleeping, and I didn't really do anything about it. I'm like a Tupac fan. Anybody heard of like Tupac? I don't sleep. Why? Because sleep is the cousin to death, right? They're maybe related, but you need to get your sleep, or else you're actually going to bring yourself a little bit closer to death. And that has been shown in mortality studies and longevity studies in a lot of different areas. So how do we improve our sleep so that we can get optimum performance? So I'm going to give you a couple of things that you can all do when you get home in order to optimize your sleep. Number one is develop a sleep routine and a sleep habit. So this is sometimes called like a wind down. So develop a habit so that at the end of the evening, you will habitually decrease your mental activity, you will start to relax, and you will rest. And oftentimes this can be very difficult after a day of training. And Aristotle was once quoted, we fall to the level of our best habits. So develop, that's probably not Aristotle, but don't quote me on that. So we will fall to our best habits. So develop that habit of good sleep practices before you go to bed, and that will pay dividends not only on your performance days, but every single day that you go out to train and that you go out to run. Sleep will enhance every single training day, thus eventually enhancing your performance in the long run. And I'm so into sleep. I've sat in those seats before, and if you need to doze off right now, go ahead. I see some people have already taken this recommendation before I talked about it, which is totally great. If you need to take a little power nap, that's totally fine. I encourage you to sleep, okay? We can get this information to you in some other format or some other form, or your coach can help you out with this information too later on. So if you need to doze off a little bit, I'm totally okay with it. I will not be offended in the slightest. Now, one thing that really can bring a lot of flack is decreasing screen time in the hours preceding sleep. So screens themselves, they emit a couple of different types of light, and especially blue light. And blue light decreases the formation and release of this very specific hormone called melatonin from a region of our brain called the pineal gland. And melatonin is responsible for decreasing our mental state and also helping us relax and fall asleep. So every second that you have a bright blue screen in front of you is another second that you're delaying the release of melatonin. Now, yeah, you can do blue light blocking sunglasses. You can do blue light blocking on your phone so the screen turns nice and yellow. However, these are not enough to significantly decrease the amount of blue light to a point where it does not inhibit the formation and release of melatonin. So some people say, well, I've seen melatonin on the grocery store shelves. Why don't I just take some of that? So why don't we take exogenous melatonin, so take it by a pill into our mouth? Because when you take hormones, you downregulate the production of those hormones in your body. So if you're taking melatonin every single night, you're telling your pineal gland, that region of the brain that produces and releases melatonin, hey, you can take a chill, you can relax. We've got it. We've got the melatonin. It's coming in every night. And actually, the amount of melatonin that comes in through a pill form is much greater by a factor of 2 to 5 times than what your poor little pineal gland can produce every single night. Thus, we'll downregulate the production and release of melatonin even more. So, decrease our screen time. Then, we have to think about the temperature of our body and the temperature of the room that we're in. And what we want to do is we want to decrease our body temperature and also decrease the temperature of the room that we're in if possible. Now, I know sometimes that's not possible and that's okay, but I can tell you from experience that sleeping in a nice hot room, maybe have a couple beads of sweat flowing down your forehead during the night, it does make sleep a little bit more difficult. So in order to enhance our sleep, just a couple of degrees of decrease in body temperature and room temperature can really help with the onset of sleep. Kind of like this nice, cool, dark, relaxing auditorium that we're in right now. So if you're kind of drifting off, then lean into that. Go for it. Be weary of wearables. Anybody got a Garmin, a Fitbit, a Whoop, that little ring thing? We get some pretty cool data from that, right? We get our heart rate variability. We'll get our sleep score. We'll get our recovery score. We'll get our REM sleep, or the stages of sleep even. However, being too conscious of this data and being too driven by this data can actually lead to enhanced mental states, enhanced mental activity, stress, and anxiety. So, has anybody ever gone through like finals week, or you got a big test coming up, you're stressed, you're anxious, you're thinking about all of those different things that you got to accomplish, and you're like, wow, I just get the best sleep of my life during those times? No. Increased stress and anxiety associated with looking at the data from wearables has been shown to inhibit sleep and actually make it more difficult for us to fall asleep. So this data is great. I'm a fan of wearables. I'm a fan of gathering data. I'm a pretty data-driven person. However, we can't allow these wearables to stress us out and thus inhibit our sleep. So if you're a person that loves your Garmin and loves your Whoop and all the information that you get from it, that's okay. Use that information, but don't be stressed out and inhibited by that information. Next, we want to bank sleep before a competition. So has anybody ever heard the old adage, oh, guys, we got a big race tomorrow. Tonight, I want you to go and get a great night of sleep, all right? Has anybody ever been stressed out or anxious before a race? Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone, because, gosh, the night before a race, I'd be lucky if I get a couple of hours of light sleep, because I was so into running for my team and running for the tradition that I was trying to propagate. And I'd be really stressed out, and I'd really have a tough time sleeping. And then there are other factors that can significantly affect our sleep as well, such as traveling, being in an unfamiliar room, sleeping with somebody that you don't really sleep with all the time. You're like, bro, we're buddies and all, but sleeping partners, not great, right? So all these things can affect your sleep the night before a competition. So it's important that the days leading up and the week leading up to competition, you try and hit that higher range of sleep in any way that you can. So you want to bank sleep in the days and week preceding competition. This has been shown to enhance endurance performance and enhance performance on the day of an actual activity. And it can help mitigate and decrease some of the negative effects that you'll feel after a night of sleep loss that many of us experience before a big race. And this is one of the avenues in which naps and power naps can be very powerful. I see a lot of people are taking a couple of power cap naps right now, and that's totally okay. These can really enhance your mental awareness, your focus, and help us try and achieve that 8 to 10 hours of sleep every single night and day. So they can add in to your total sleep. Now, it's not the best thing in the world, these naps, and in some instances, naps can actually make people not able to sleep at night. So if you're one of those people, then you should avoid naps. However, for the large majority of the population, if you're able to get a quick nap in the middle of the day, then that can be beneficial. Now, I also want to tell you some of the nuances regarding naps, especially the duration of your nap, because many people will be tempted to take a really long nap in the morning before a competition, especially if you have a late night competition. And many times this can be beneficial as long as you don't sleep for too long of a duration. So our sleep oscillates through these various cycles from very light sleep, where our brain activity is actually very similar to where we're awake, all the way down to deep sleep, where our brain waves will get slower with higher amplitudes of waves, and our body's basically paralyzed, and we're very deeply asleep. And then our mental state ramps back up until we get to a different stage of sleep called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. Now, this entire cycle takes between 90 minutes and 3 hours, depending on what time of night you're measuring this. And the proportions of light sleep to deep sleep will also change depending on what time of day or night you're sleeping. Now, there is a factor and a theory called sleep inertia. So if you let yourself dip down into the deep sleep state after about 45 minutes to an hour, then when you wake up, you'll find yourself feeling quite groggy, you'll be sluggish, you'll be slow, and these just aren't things that we want to feel right before a big competition. So if you are taking a nap the day of a competition or a day of a hard training, then you want to limit that nap to at least below 45 minutes, preferably between 20 and 30 minutes, so that you don't have that sleep inertia. Now, this is all about reducing running injury, but really we reduce running injury in order to improve our performance. And I want to broaden your horizons throughout the spectrum of endurance athletes and talk about this individual, Jessie Diggins. So Jessie Diggins is a cross-country skier. So we're all cross-country runners in here, and Jessie is a cross-country skier. And early on in her career, she actually struggled from an eating disorder and disordered eating. And unlike Mary Kane's story, where there were factors outside of herself that were limiting her ability to eat and get proper nutrition, her factors were intrinsic. There was this pervasive myth that you need to be much, 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 much lighter in order to enhance your performance and enhance your ability to win medals and move forward in your career. And this disordered eating actually affected her in many of the same ways as Mary Kane. So her hormonal levels were altered and dysregulated, her sleep was altered, her emotional states were altered, and her performance was altered. Jessie Diggins was able to bounce back, and in the last Winter Olympics, win the first gold medal that the United States has ever won in cross-country skiing. She was the anchor leg of a skiing relay, and in the final 100-meter stretch, she passed 2 gold medal sprint cross-country skiers in order to secure the first gold medal we have ever won in cross-country skiing. So quite a turnaround, right? So she was able to bounce back from her disordered eating and get help in order to work her way up to winning gold medals not only in the Olympics, but also world championships, and also in many of the tours that are similar to the Diamond League in track. And I really love this quote from Jessie Diggins. If you follow her on Instagram and look at her website, she has a lot of great information regarding optimal performance as well as disordered eating. And this quote right here, "Don't let the ear-to-ear grin fool you. When I'm smiling and bouncing up and down is also when I'm at my most dangerous." So she'll be all giddy on the start line of like a 10-kilometer ski race, even though she's about to push herself in a way that no one else on that course will be able to that day. And when she's in this state, she says, "I'm just happy enough to be able to will myself to suffer the way that nobody else can." And if you see her at the end of a cross-country ski race, you actually absolutely see the manifestation of the suffering as she collapses and she's breathing hard and absolutely still at the finish line of every single race, because she's competing for her teammates and she's competing for her country, and that has resulted in gold medals for the United States. And this is where Mary Kane would likely be if she had been given proper advice and proper help and proper nutrition during her early career. And I love this last line. "I'm just happy enough to be able to will myself to suffer in the way that nobody else can," because it really reminds me of an individual that I looked up to when I was a runner. And that's Steve Prefontaine. This was like my favorite runner back in the day. And I just loved the thought of racing to see who had more guts and who was able to suffer more. And that's the thing that produced faster running times and better performance. So the classic quote, which I'm sure that you've all read, "A lot of people run a race to see who is the fastest. I run to see who has the most guts, who can punish himself into an exhausting pace, and then at the end, punish themselves even more." Just like Jessie Diggins, the modern day Prefontaine, if you will, except Jessie actually won a gold medal. Yeah. So we can connect that across the spectrum. We can see a lot of people that can positively bounce back from things like disordered eating, and they can optimize their health and thus optimize their performance. And at the end of the day, it'll help you to reduce your running risks so that hopefully you can all excel without injury. And that's it. This program is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Always consult with your physician before starting any exercises or doing anything contained in this program. Always stop if you experience any pain, discomfort, or difficulties performing anything described in this program.